So, hello everybody. Catherine, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Sabina.
Yes, good.
Yes.
Okay, just checking that I. Good morning, everybody. Oh, you've already got the slides up. I wondered whether we just. I see people are still coming in, so wondering whether we just give it 2 minutes maybe to give everyone the chance to get ready. Oh, I see many video faces. Great. Well. Second best option, obviously, and seeing you really face to face would be better. Let's see how we are going on numbers. I can see people coming in all the time. So let's see, we have Ranjana there. I can see Anesa. I can see Doris. And I can see Debbie. Yes, okay, so I think we are getting ready. Good, then let's make a start. Catherine, Jody, shall we start?
Yeah, all good to get going.
Yeah. Okay, good. So then, yes, good morning and welcome again, or welcome back, or for those of you who've been here for the first time this week, warm welcome. It's nice to see you, and it's nice to see that we are still going strong. We've had several very interesting panels over the last 3 days, including the PGR competition yesterday, which was really an excellent display also to see that our next researcher generation is delivering not just really high quality research, but also research that responds to what is surrounding us. I think all panels so far have had a strong link to the societal needs that are surrounding us at the moment and or in the long term. And I think even though we have given each panel a slightly different title and focus, I think this panel here will be no exception. So obviously it's on technology and lifelong learning, and this panel will be chaired by Dr. Ranjana Das. Hello, Ranjana. Ranjana is a reader in Media and Communication Studies in the Department of Sociology. I think in our faculty you actually don't need an introduction, but I would like to say it anyway. Ranjana has long been interested in the uses of technology, especially in people's sort of lived and everyday lives, if that is my take from your research. And last year, Ranjana is another of those colleagues who actually adapted her research very rapidly in response to the COVID pandemic and launched a project which investigated the impacts, probably the disproportionately high impacts of the pandemic and the social distancing measures around that on pregnant women and new mothers. Ranjana, of course, being herself a new mother and knowing this from experience firsthand. And part of this project was, of course, to investigate the role that digital support can play in maintaining the well-being of pregnant women and young mothers, new mothers, and showing that this is a very nuanced, that this is a topic that requires very nuanced approach to it. And because of this research, as well as the other research that Ranjana has done over the years, Ranjana was also chosen as our faculty winner for the Vice Chancellor's Award for Excellence in Research last year. And of course, the everyday use of technology now firmly embraces the use of technology in education. Last year meant that we all had to begin to think much more about this question of digital support and digital of our students, of their education, I think also of their well-being, of course. So many of us have begun in a much more focused way, I think, to think about the questions that Ranjana had already addressed in her very timely research, in fact. And this is why we asked Ranjana to chair the panel today, and I'm pleased you have accepted this. And the other reason is, of course, that Ranjana last year also became the theme champion of the new university research theme on technology and society. So I'm very pleased that we have you here, Ranjana, and I'm also pleased that this is another panel where we have strong participation from other faculties and departments, this time not as panel chair, but as the contributors. So Ranjana, I think I leave you to introduce the other panels, and I hand over to you, and I look forward to the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very, very kind and generous introduction. And I think just to add a small bit to what you've already said, one of the key things about this panel, why it's sort of super special to me in this Festival of Social Science and Research, is that it's actually the first proper event that is linked to the university's newest strategic research theme, Technology and Society. And we've got a 9-event speaker series starting in February, but this kind of is the first time that we have an event associated with this. So really special. So a very warm welcome to all of you. As you will know from the chat, there are a few housekeeping, virtual housekeeping tips out there from Catherine, one of which is about her social media and Twitter. So many of you I know are on social media, so please use the 2 hashtags for today, FASS Festival 2021 and FASS Lifelong Learning. And if you follow the Technology and Society theme, Tech Sock Surrey, feel free to tag us in, but we'll find you via the hashtag. And thank you very much for joining. So one of the key things I think to highlight about this fantastic transdisciplinary panel we've got is the focus on that lifelong bit of things. And my colleagues from very different domains and from very different fields, we'll all talk about a few things that bring these things together. So I'm not going to get into what they will actually talk about, but you will see that there is an emphasis on ongoing learning that continues outside of and beyond formality and formal learning and education. There is an emphasis on the user, a very person-focused, user-focused approach, really thinking about contexts and conditions in which technology is used, motivations, the voluntary nature of much of this, the diversity of contexts and the multiplicity of contexts in which technology is adopted, the informality of things. So these are themes, this ongoing, voluntary, diverse nature of things will repeatedly come back in the 3 fantastic papers we'll hear about today. And they come from empirical projects that are very, very different and that often make the headlines. So it's a very exciting panel. And without getting into the topics that my colleagues will cover, let's get right into it. So we'll begin with our first speaker, Doris Dippold. And Doris is Senior Lecturer in Intercultural Communication here at the University of Surrey and has a background in applied linguistics. And so far, her involvement with education has taken her to Germany, the USA, China, Luxembourg, and of course, the UK. Now, Doris's main research interests are in internationalization of higher education, English as a medium of instruction and as a lingua franca, and those intersections between language and technology. And she's lead educator of the research-led Future Learn MOOC that we'll hear about, communicating with diverse audiences. So again, that focus on diversity and really thinking about users and audiences, which so far has seen 9,000 learners from 153 countries enrolled. And may I just say that Doris very recently, before Christmas, was the university's Innovator of the Year. And we are so proud of her in FASS for all her fantastic achievements. So over to you, Doris.
Okay, thank you, Ranjana. Thank you very much, Ranjana. So I'll try to share my screen now. And I hope this is working well. Okay, I hope everybody can see my screen.
Perfect. Yeah, we can.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Okay. Sorry, I just realized it's not the beginning of the presentation. Okay. So I will start off today's topic with a presentation on. So the theme of the panel obviously is lifelong learning, and I will talk about the MOOC that I designed on communicating with diverse audiences, which is a part of lifelong learning, and it's part of kind of Future Learn's remit to get a university education out to people throughout the lifespan and across the world. Okay, so Future Learn. If you don't know what Future Learn is one of the world's sort of biggest sort of platforms that open MOOCs. There are massive open courses, online courses to see.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I couldn't get the other. Oh, okay. So so you can see here that there's sort of about us. So we offer a diverse selection of courses from leading universities and cultural institutions from around the world. They're delivered one step at a time and accessible mobile, tablet, and desktop. You can fit learning around your life. So lifelong learning here. And we believe learning should be an enjoyable social experience. So our courses offer the opportunity to discuss what you're learning with others as you go, helping you make fresh discoveries and form new ideas. So it's based around very much constructivist notions of learning from others, discussing with others, debating with others. So this is just showing very quickly the front page of the course, communicating with diverse audiences. Okay, so why did I design this course? So actually, it came out of failure, really. 2015, I applied for a promotion to senior lecturer, and I failed, and I was rejected for promotion. But I had a bit of feedback, and it says Doris should maybe try to contribute a bit more to impact. So right, good. How do I do this? And I always had a desire to do intercultural communication, intercultural training with a bit of a fresh approach, if you will. I was very dissatisfied. If you go into kind of look at commercial intercultural training courses, they're all very much they're using a cultural difference approach. So there's China here, there's Germany here. What's different? They don't actually really teach you about communication. They do not teach you about language in intercultural communication. And actually, in many cases, they actually encourage the formation of more stereotypes rather than breaking them down. So I wanted to do something different. And I saw another course on FutureLearn led by an applied linguist up in Nottingham, which I really enjoyed, which part of which I actually did. I didn't quite complete it, but I did a part of it. I thought, okay, I could do something similar. So I walked into the Department of Technology Enhanced Learning and said I want to do a MOOC, and they have really supported me of getting this going. So the course in itself is it's targeted at professionals who communicate regularly across linguistic and cultural boundaries, and I've deliberately kept it very open. So professionals, that can be anybody, that can be nurses, that can be doctors, that can be us university educators or administrators, and so on, other public services, police, and so on and so forth. And the course uses a language-led approach to intercultural communication, which is not drawing on models of cultural difference, but on theories and models from applied linguistics. So, for example, English as a lingua franca, politeness theory, and interaction sociolinguistics. And it's also an approach which encourages reflection on personal communication rather than providing sort of simple one-size-fits-all solutions, which is, I mean, one of my kind of points of dissatisfaction with existing courses. So in the course, it has 4 weeks, and it is each week has about 20 or so steps. And I just on this slide, I just want to showcase kind of how it works. So it has little lectures, so part of them are given by me. You can actually see me, you can see my face, but it also has steps where students read something. So for example, in this one, I'm making them read actually an academic paper, but I made sure it's quite a short one, and I've scaffolded the reading a little bit with some questions. You might recognize some of these people. I have got 4 role plays in the MOOC, one for each week, most of which were done by my lovely colleagues in the School of Literature and Languages, who proved to be brilliant actors. And they're sort of showcasing issues of intercultural communication. I also have 3 tools which which are basic downloadable worksheets that allow reflection and planning of communicative on and off communicative events. And then there is obviously the Future Learn model of actually debate and discussion. So there's sort of discussion prompts after every step. So yeah, but why did I do this? Again, in that failed application from promotion, it was sort of Doris should try to do a bit more impact, right? So I said, impact. I said, okay, Ref 2021. What can I do? So reading how can this course contribute to impact? So reading the kind of impact examples, sort of what kind of impact might you achieve? I found this one. So this was one of the examples which is in the Ref impact sort of Bible impact handbook. So it says here the awareness, attitudes, understanding of sections of the public have been informed, and their ability to make informed decisions on issues improved by engaging them with research. So yes, so this was one of my aims, translated into the research, into this MOOC. I wanted to engage learners with a language-led perspective from intercultural communication, allowing them to make informed changes to their professional practice. So that's the kind of my translation of that into very sort of specific impact aims. And then there was another one of influencing the design and delivery of curriculum and syllabi in schools, higher education institutions or other educational institutions. And that translated into a second impact aim, which was to change the practices of intercultural trainers, coaches in terms of how they design the delivery of training. So course impact, did I achieve aims? I would say yes. So this is from the course survey so far. This was a snapshot, I think, taken in December or so. Did you gain new knowledge or skills by taking the course? 91% yes. Have you applied what you have learned? 63% yes. And have you shared what you learned with other people? Also 63% yes. And then there's also impact. There's also some impact statements in terms of verbal feedback, which partly I've gleaned from the course survey, but partly also from learners' comments in the MOOC. So, for example, here it says this commenting on the week about English as a lingua franca. This person said, I now understand how communication can be affected by norms, rules, customs, misconceptions in the English we use. I learned how I can use the communication tool to make my communication understanding more successful. And that relates to that first impact aim of engaging learners with a language-led perspective of intercultural communication, allowing them to make informed changes to their practice. And then there's a second comment here saying that I have suggested improvements to our, so this is more, this is about the impact on intercultural training, impact on intercultural coaches. And this person here is saying, I've suggested improvements to our intercultural understanding training. So we'll put forward new ideas created from this course while developing of the replacement course. So sort of impacting the curricula of new courses in that field. Yeah, so that's a second impact aim. Then there was also, obviously, you know, no course ever gets just positive comments. So there was also sort of comments along these lines. So the advice was common sense, no need for the technical jargon. Then same one is in the second one. Course was full of academic jargon. And then in the third comment here is the end of it I found quite interesting. How is knowing the name of the person who voiced a particular opinion, introduced a theory, going to help me in a situation? It is not. Providing case studies and problems in a problems and solutions format would have been much more beneficial to the audience base of Future Learn. Well, that's interesting. That's exactly what I wanted to avoid, the problem solutions format in a way. So it's quite an interesting comment. In particular, I then came across as part of another project of a term called the Rigor Relevance Gap. And this kind of really fits into that train of thought. So the Rigor Relevance Gap has been defined sort of loosely as the gap between academic rigor and relevance to professionals and their work. And obviously, so it was always my intention to make this course research-led, to have some academic rigor while still communicating these concepts to a more general audience. So in practice, really, I mean, this raises a question, and maybe we can discuss this after all the presentations later, is in practice, so how do we navigate the challenge of providing relevant, accessible content without compromising academic integrity and kind of oversimplifying issues in that kind of problem solution approach? And actually, more practically, just last week, I had some feedback from learners on the course. They do, at the end of each week, they do end of week quiz. And if they pass those quizzes, enough questions, those quizzes, they can get the end of course certificate. But the quizzes are multiple choice. And that was a real problem for me in designing those quizzes, because how do we actually assess with a multiple choice quiz a course which actually doesn't center on knowledge, but on reflection? So that's a kind of practical issue that I'm facing with this. So yeah, so this is just some questions I wanted to raise in terms of lifelong learning and bringing academic knowledge into lifelong learning. And I'm hoping we can sort of discuss this more later. Okay, so this ends my presentation, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Doris. That was really interesting, and I think we all appreciated how you sort of laid out the feedback, including the difficult feedback and the challenging feedback, because that is not something we see a lot of usually, and I think that was really refreshing and very useful. Thank you. Okay, so we are now going to move to our second panelist for today. Anesa Hosein is senior lecturer in the Department of Higher Education at the University of Surrey. And she says she's passionate about her role as an educator in developing and mentoring academic staff and colleagues. So her students in academic practice through using evidence-based research for the higher education sector. And her larger role is to develop sort of policy and practice that can really make a difference in people's lives, and particularly those from disadvantaged and marginalized backgrounds. And she will talk to us about all things gaming. And I think it's a really fascinating presentation that lies ahead. Over to you.
Thank you, Regina. It's going.
I think, Anesa, your audio is cutting a little bit in and out. Do you mind muting yourself and starting again?
Okay, I will try it.
Yeah, I think it works now. Perfect.
Okay. I think it's just my computer trying to load up the presentation. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, super clear, Anesa.
Yes.
Okay. I think my presentation is not loading for some reason, or can you see it?
We can see it. You just need to pop it into full screen.
There we go.
Yeah,
right. Thank you. Right. So today I'm going to talk about video gaming and lifelong learning, and I'm talking a bit more about how video gaming early in your life can affect your choices of lifelong learning in the future. So it's slightly different from using video gaming with lifelong learning or learning from video gaming that normally you might see in different research. So one of the things I was really interested in is, well, actually, I'm really interested about myself, to be fair. I'm really interested in understanding how what I did when I was younger affects what I do when I'm older. And there's actually a theory for this called life course theory, which looks at how what you do when you're early life, how it affects you when you're in much later life. And I was really interested in understanding how did I come to do a STEM degree, which is I did my degree in physics. And one of the things I was thinking about is I used to play video games when I was younger. And I wondered, in some extent, did me playing video games when I was younger affected my choice of doing a physics degree? So one way of doing this is to try and go through what we call retrospective narratives. So you ask people, what did you do when you were younger? What happens now? And so it's a lot about life histories. One of the problems with those using that approach is that it has a problem with memory. Sometimes your memory gets you don't remember as well as you should. The other way is to look at longitudinal studies, which has been done. So people collecting data on people every year and seeing whether early life affects this. So that tends to be much more of a quantitative approach, whilst the life narrative history tends to be a much more qualitative approach. So I decided to use a quantitative approach to look to see, slide change, to look to see if video gaming when people were younger affected what they did when they were older. So what kind of degree that they did. I used something called a longitudinal survey of young people in England, which is a survey that was started back in 2004 and still going. And it collected data on young people at the age of 13 until they were 19 every year. So that's for 7 years. And then again when they were 24. And then they've just done one recently again when they were 31. When they were 13 years old, data was collected on boys and girls and then number of hours that they played, that they game per week for. And then in wave 7, when they were about 19 years old, they had which degree program they were in. So I looked to see this data to see, did video gaming when they were younger affected which degree that it did when they were older. And yes, interestingly enough, I did find a relationship. I found that girls who played 9 hours or more video games compared to non-gamers were 3 times more likely to pursue a physical science degree than any other option. And when I said physical science, I'm talking about physics, chemistry, engineering, maths, but not the life sciences, because I was really interested in the physical sciences. This got published a couple years back. It had lots of media interest, particularly from the technology and video gaming industry. But one of the things that I really noticed coming back from the people who were publishing this research was that they forgot most of the important stuff I consider in my research, the more nuanced approaches, because they were talking about girls who play video games 3 times more likely to study STEM degrees. I was talking about physical STEM degrees. It wasn't just 3 times more likely to study, it was 3 times more likely to study in comparison to non-gamers. And, these things get me concerned about how research was being used. At the same time, the Entertainment Software Association, European Video Games Industry, even Xbox, the National Assembly for Wales, they were also using this publication to help further their own agenda. They're still using it to further their own agenda, and it becomes more concerning because if they're using this to create some sort of impact or agenda policy, then it needs to make sure that it's more nuanced. Is it every girl? Is it all girls? There's different kinds of girls. And around this time, I became interested in the concept of intersectionality by Kimberly Crenshaw. And if you're not familiar with Crenshaw's idea of intersectionality, basically she was a researcher, a lawyer and a researcher, and she was interested in about discrimination against Black females. And what she said was that the employment discrimination was not happening to these women because they were Black or because they were female, but because they were Black females. So it was those two identities together that was causing the discrimination. So I was really interested in how our identities, how those mixture of identities might affect the way that we might do video gaming. So one of the things I wanted to look for is to see how ethnicity with girls affected video games and looking at their outcomes of doing a physical STEM degree. Unfortunately, in the data set, the longitudinal study of young people in England, there weren't a lot of girls who were heavy game ethnic minorities who were girls who were doing heavy gaming. So that in itself was an interesting finding itself because they don't tend to do lots of video gaming. So the information I was putting out mainly was about mainly white girls rather than ethnic minority girls. So that's really important to mention as well. The other thing that I wanted to look at to see was whether coming from a poor neighborhood in comparison to a richer neighborhood, whether that made any difference to whether the girls who video game. So imagine a perfect world in some ways, not too perfect. If we had 2 girls, and that's in the red, if we had 2 girls from a poor neighborhood who wasn't gaming, decided to do a STEM degree, and 2 boys who also not gaming, decided to do a STEM degree, from a poor neighborhood, what I found actually was that if two girls, we found that girls who were from a rich neighborhood, they were still 2 times more likely to do a STEM degree. However, if the poor girls were playing video games, in comparison to those who were from a poor neighborhood, they were almost 3 times more likely. So basically, by being able to game, the girls from poor neighborhoods are 3 times more likely to go into a P-STEM degree than those who were not gaming. And that was almost equivalent to girls from a richer neighborhood. That's interesting because the girls from richer neighborhoods, they tend to go to independent schools. And when they go to independent schools, they're more likely to go to do on P-STEM degrees or physical STEM degrees. And in some ways, the gaming was quite creating an equal balance between the opportunities that girls from poorer neighborhoods can get to go into P-STEM degrees. So that was interesting. About last year, I got a grant through the ESRC looking at student well-being and life outcomes project. So we're looking at mental health of students using the same longitudinal study of young people in England data set, looking to see how their mental health affects their life, their well-being and their life outcomes, particularly for ones who went on to do, who were in university. And so as part of that, I was interested in understanding how video games, mental health, and their outcomes are affected. Because there's a lot of research around how video games affect mental health. So I decided to look to see, is there any impact on video games and mental health and whether they go on to do a physical STEM degree. And so I did the analysis. What I found was that it didn't really matter in some ways whether people had good mental health or poor mental health. For boys or girls, they still went on to pursue a P-STEM degree, particularly for girls, if they had a high level of video gaming. So basically, for both boys and girls, poor mental health was unrelated to whether they pursue a P-STEM degree over any other option, regardless whether they were heavy gamers or not. So there was really no relationship between heavy gaming in this particular context and for students and for mental health. And I think that's an interesting finding in itself, because it's important to recognize that not all video gaming is bad. It can be good as well. So that's what I have to say. Basically, one of the things I'm going to be doing next is that the Department for Education has run another longitudinal study of young people in England for people who started school when they were 13 to 14 years old. And I'm really interested in looking to see whether that generation is different to the generation that I just looked at, which is the one that when students started school around 2004. The other thing I'm going to be looking at is see whether recently the Center for Longitudinal Study ran a COVID study around these same children. Well, they're not children anymore, they're adults, and when they were 13, looking to see what sort of technologies they were using during lockdown. And I wanted to see whether their video gaming and their early lives would affect what kind of technologies they use during COVID. And so that's what I'm going to be doing next, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you ever so much. That was so interesting. And I think one of the things that particularly stays with me from this talk is that, at least within my field in media and communications, there's so much paranoia and panic that we see in tabloid newspapers, largely simplistically, in a very linear way, associating gaming with negative things in popular press, when evidence has repeatedly shown that things are far more complex and nuanced. And I think in that context, your findings are so interesting and really valuable, and need to be spoken about so much more widely. So thank you for that. And finally, before we move on to our third panel, a quick reminder to everybody to please pop questions into the chat if you have them, or comments even, or praise as we go along, so that when time comes to ask questions, we can just tackle with them from the chat or invite you to ask them, etc. So do pop questions in the chat. Okay, so our third panelist today is Debbie Cooke, who's senior lecturer in the School of Health Sciences at the University of Surrey. Her research focuses on the management of long-term conditions, and her latest work focuses on self-management of long-term conditions, technology and technological support for people managing these long-term conditions, and particularly with a focus on diabetes. And her teaching includes a focus on evidence-based practice and critical appraisal and research for professional practice. So over to you, Debbie.
Lovely, thank you. Can you hear me okay? I'm going to talk to you today about one particular project that I'm working on and facilitating lifelong learning and lifestyle change within that project, which is an online supported self-management program for people who have type 2 diabetes. So this is a testbed programme funded by NHS England through Innovate UK. And the testbed programmes are a big piece of work that NHS England decided to fund a few years ago. They commissioned 7 testbeds in the first wave of funding and a further 7 in the second wave. And we were fortunate enough to receive funding in that second wave. So we're one of 3 diabetes testbeds nationally. And the whole purpose of these programmes are to bring together industry and the NHS to tackle prominent health challenges like type 2 diabetes. So it's more exciting than it sounds, but we attended a speed dating event between the NHS and potential industrial partners. Kath Hart from Nutritional Sciences and I went along and represented the NHS and found one of our industrial partners there. So it's important to emphasise that this is a massive collaboration between the NHS, the university and 3 industrial partners. So we're working with Silver Cloud, who are the largest online provider of cognitive behavioural therapy, online cognitive behavioural therapy. And they've developed a diabetes specific programme, which is psychoeducational. It looks in particular at reducing diabetes distress. We're also working with Second Nature. Their programme is very holistic, but focuses on lifestyle change, particularly around healthy eating and exercise and sleep hygiene. And finally, Commit to Change, who their programmes very behavioural in focus, and it's about goal setting to support behavioural change. So why did we need to do this project? So these are the arguments we made in our grant. So we know that scientifically proven approaches to diabetes management are very hard to achieve and maintain. It's very hard to make lifestyle change and then keep going with that. We also know that structured group education is seen as, a gold standard within diabetes management, regular diabetes structured group education. And that is so much so that that's part of NHS NICE guidance in terms of diabetes management. But we know that attendance rates are poor. Only about 6% of newly diagnosed people with type 2 actually attend, and there is some negative perceptions as well. Not everybody wants to attend a group-based programme. We also know that this separation of physical and mental health is widening inequalities and also reducing quality of care. And there's quite a strong case there for focusing on diabetes distress, which as a psychologist, I'm very interested in. We also know that existing NHS systems aren't equipped to cope with increasing numbers of people with type 2 diabetes. And finally, COVID makes a very strong argument for providing remote delivery of diabetes structured education. So this just shows the kind of pathway into and through our programme. So at the top there, you can see our recruitment strategies. We had a number of recruitment strategies, but by far the most successful was text messages from GPs. So we had to do a lot of work to engage GP surgeries to promote the programme. And then people came to attend a baseline clinic appointment where all their measures were collected, clinical and demographic measures, and only then were they allowed to enter the programme and choose whichever programmes they wanted to interact with. And then they're followed up at 6 months. So our primary outcome is HbA1c, that's glycosylated haemoglobin, which basically is the average blood glucose level over the past 6 to 8 weeks. That's our primary outcome and what we've powered our study on. Our secondary outcomes are weight, BMI, blood pressure, cholesterol, and also medication use. If we can show a reduction in medication use over the 6-month period, then we've got we're also beginning to provide a good case for cost effectiveness of our programme as well. We're also very interested in looking at to what extent our programme has reached our target population, how much they've engaged with it, and also the longitudinal impact of the programme on diabetes distress. I'm personally very interested in that. We're also conducting a process and health economic evaluation as well. So this just shows some of the characteristics of our participants. So we're at the point in the programme where we've recruited everyone who we need for the evaluation, and we're now following up. So we're not quite at the point of having collected all of our data. We're still following up the last few people recruited into the programme. So, and we've got slightly more men recruited, a mean diabetes duration of 5 years and a mean HbA1c of 59. That's just above targets. And what I was really wanting to show you here, thinking about lifelong learning, was the spread in age amongst our participants. So you can see there we've got a really wide spread from people in their 20s up to people in their 80s, and the largest groups seem to be in that 56 to 70 cohort. So that's really encouraging. It's showing that we are managing to recruit across the lifespan. So as I said before, we did a process evaluation and we interviewed healthcare professionals and people living with type 2 diabetes to ask them about their experience of taking part in the programme. We interviewed 19 people, a range of men, women, different ages to represent our participants. And I wanted to draw your attention in particular to the orange and the blue hexagons there. So 2 of our themes, the user-led person-centred approach and the active ingredients and sustaining the programme. And I'm just going to talk about some of the sub-themes within those 2 main themes. So our participants talked about structured, flexible support being different from routine care, and they liked that. So this participant talks about the approach being all-encompassing, so and particularly highlights the emphasis on the emotional perspective. So we have to bear in mind that people with type 2 diabetes, this is a highly stigmatized condition, and some people don't even disclose that they have type 2 diabetes to family members because of the stigma associated with it, or the perceived stigma, and so I think clearly what this participant's enjoying is the emotional perspective, building up self-esteem, and also talks about that flexibility, being able to drop into it and pick up what they need for the day in just a few minutes. And then people also talked about responsive, timely interactions with their health coach or supporter. So a very important part of our programme is that sitting behind the websites are health coaches. So with both the Silver Cloud and Second Nature programmes, there is a physical person sitting behind the website who's interacting with people who are registered on those programmes. And I think that's a real kind of magic ingredient within this programme that's helping to achieve some of the changes that we're seeing anecdotally at the moment. So this person talks about the support that the supporter's providing, that she's always available, and is giving nudges and prompts to read things and to ask what they think about those articles. And the next participant also talks about the advice and monitoring, doing a diary and getting quick responses back. So then from our other theme, we had active engagement and continuous learning. So no education should just be one static, something that's delivered at one point. It needs to be continuous, doesn't it? And actually NICE guidance used to say that structured group education should be delivered, everyone should have access to it once, and they changed that subsequently to should be offered on an annual basis. And this person, participant 4, talks about the learning being a daily thing. So there's something happening every day, and they talk about the pace being suited to sort of their needs. And then people also talked about peer support and how vital that was. So not only have they got the support from the health coaches, they've got peer support because you're put into an online group on the Second Nature programme. So knowing that there's people in the same position as them, and knowing that there's people who will understand their frustrations. So just a summary of our key findings. I think that person-centred approach is really important, and it's interesting listening to Doris's talk. I think the language that's used within our partners' programmes is really supportive and very person-centred, non-judgmental, and that's been critical. I think it's a real key element of our programmes. So people with type 2 appreciated the flexibility and novelty of the programme. The health coach is critical to people's ability to engage with the interventions, and they're attributing success to you know, that health coach being part of the programme. And then we actually found that Second Nature, we paid slightly more for some of our licenses so that people had access to scales and trackers that would feed back results. Actually, most people spoke about those not necessarily being required, and they were seen as a bit of a hindrance. So that was quite interesting and an unexpected finding, not what we would have anticipated. This is our website. This is our kind of our portal. So this is what people see when they initially enter the programme. And just to summarise, this is the number of registrations we've had so far. It's actually up now. It's 1,270, and we've got 720 who've attended a baseline clinic and completed baseline checks. We've had to move to remote monitoring now because of COVID, but that's worked quite well. You know, sending people blood packs that they then have to return, and so sending that to their homes. And we've had a 75% uptake of Second Nature programme. That seems to be the most popular programme, and they've reported a weight loss of average weight loss of 6.3 kilograms at 12 weeks, and we've still got licenses left. So do signpost people to our website because anyone can access it now. So if you know anyone with type 2, we would love them to register and take part.
Thank you so much, Debbie. That was fascinating and fantastic. And I think, sorry, is my voice echoing?
No, you're fine.
Oh, okay. So one of the things, just to echo what you said, I think that comes across from all three papers today is that person-centeredness.
Sorry, Ranjana, you are a bit echoey. Debbie, would you mind turning your mic off? I think it could be that. Just thank you.
Not sure it's okay now, but
that's
seems
better.
to be a bit better. Okay, cool. And I just wanted to say that person-centeredness, the user-centeredness, I think that cuts across all three papers, and the attention that has been paid to context and to the fact that use is always contextual and always diverse. And I think that's fascinating. Instead of kind of putting technology in the driver's seat, all my colleagues here have sort of thought about that human warmth, individuals and institutions around technology, and really paid attention to that, and that is really fantastic. Okay, so it's question time, and I can't see any questions in the chat. I can see lots of praise. There is a question about missing the website Debbie was referring to. So Debbie, if you wouldn't mind typing details into the chat. Right, okay, so if you have a question, would you mind raising your hand, virtually I mean, because I can't really see everybody on my screen here, but literally if you could use the virtual hand icon on the top bar, there's a little mini hand there, we can then come to you with questions. I don't know if anybody wants to start off. I have something for all three panelists, but I might want to give them a bit of a break. Oops, no, that I have raised my own hand somehow. I don't know how that has happened. But thank you, Debbie, for the website link. It's on the chat. Okay, so audience, get ready to ask questions. So I'm going to start it off with a sort of a well, it's not non-topical, but it's sort of a beyond the topic kind of a question to our panelists, and we can go in the order in which you spoke. But really, what made you get into this research? And I know, Doris, you talked a little bit about the sort of the institutional context of it, and gosh, did you deliver impact? You did. But if you could tell us a little bit more about what wasn't on the slides in terms of why this project and what inspired you to get into it, that'll be super. And if you could go in the same order, so Doris first.
Okay, that's a very good question. I mean, obviously, it was actually originally the impetus was the failed promotion application, and thinking about, I never thought about impact beforehand. That was really the impetus to actually even think about not only doing research for myself, I'm also doing it for others. And but then there was a second impetus that came. I said, okay, impact, how do I do this? And I started working with it was a local intercultural communication company in Farnham Castle. They're down in Farnham, obviously, at the castle, and actually tried to co-design an intercultural training course with them that sort of builds on the principles I wanted to build it on. But again, it was a kind of, there was willingness, but again, there was very much two different cultures there. There was me as the academic wanting to infuse these new approaches into them, and there was them having, wanting to work with the established frameworks. And in the end product, we did actually design an end product, but there was very little then in it of me. And in the end, because of costs, we never got to deliver the course anyway, because we had to charge. I didn't have funding through which we could have offered the course for free, perhaps, and we had to charge, and actually never got any attendance. And then again, I thought, okay, so how can we sort this issue of cost and accessibility and so on? So that was then the kind of idea of the MOOC and putting it online, and that obviously that actually did work. So yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think it's so good to, you've kind of talked about this more substantial intellectual practical context, but also, like you said, the institutional context. And I think it's really important that we keep both of those things in mind as we go about our own professional practice. And it's so important to think about those things. And sometimes the impetus does come from that kind of an institutional push. Okay, so Anesa, do you want to tell us about what fascinated you? You also talked a little bit about that narrative, isn't it, between what you're doing now versus what you did before, and that kind of a life course narrative. But what really inspired you into gaming and STEM?
I think for me, originally it was just more about how do we get girls more into STEM subjects. I think that's where it started originally, because there is a leaky pipeline for girls going into STEM. So whilst there are a lot of girls who do sciences at 10 years old, it tends to drop off much more dramatically as they increase in age, and there's less girls going into STEM. So I was really interested in trying to find ways in which girls can go more into STEM. And I think that's why I started thinking about what things that we know from my own life, how that has helped me to get into STEM. And that's why I started looking into video games. And I think it's really important to think about getting girls more into STEM, not because I don't think any other subject is really good. I think all subjects are great. But the problem is that if we don't get girls into STEM subjects itself, is that often things are not designed for females. And that's the problem, because I think about video games itself, the protagonist is never a female, it's always a male. Well, not always, but most times it's a male. And I think those are the things that got me really interested in trying to get to see how can we get girls more into designing, into doing more engineering things, and particularly around video games as well. And I think that's what really interested me, because of myself. It's really me researching myself using other people.
That's so fascinating, and that really kind of places the researcher at the heart of the research project, that kind of imbues it with life, and that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And I listened with interest because I myself never had any talents in STEM at all, and that is definitely making me think. So I'm going to go and have a think about this question of choice and what shapes choice. Okay, and over to you, Debbie. I know you talk about sort of management of long-term conditions being sort of a broader interest area of yours, but particularly what brought you to this nexus of diabetes and technology?
Thanks, Ranjana. Yeah, so I've actually got type 1 diabetes myself, and so that's what drew me into working in this area. And for a long time, I've wanted to do more work in type 2 diabetes. And actually my husband has type 2 diabetes as well. But I was approached actually through nutritional sciences. a GP, a local GP who looks after the Commit to Change programme, and he repeatedly pestered me actually and said we need to put a grant in on this, and so we did put a grant in, and we failed, we were unsuccessful, and then I saw this bid come up, the Innovate UK work, and actually at the time I was absolutely exhausted. And you know when you see a call come up and you think, oh, it's perfect, but I've got no energy to put this together. But I knew it was right for us. And what I liked was the idea of working with people who basically industrial partners who already had established products with a market presence. And that really excited me because, you know, in all the years that I've been working in diabetes, so often I see self-management programs developed and a long time spent developing them, and they work, and then nothing ever happens with them. So they don't reach that next stage of, you know, Doris kept talking about impact, or of actually being successfully implemented and launched. And so that's what excited me about this project. And also what excited me is just that the focus was on implementation. So evaluation was part of it, but Innovate UK don't fund evaluation. They fund implementation and supporting sort of in innovations, and so that really excited me as well. And I hope that we do manage to sort of scale this up a bit more and roll it out. Obviously, that will be dependent on the evaluation. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you again. Another great account of sort of that interplay between the researcher inside the project in so many ways, as Debbie, as you shared, and again some impetus coming from the outside. And I think that focus on sort of going beyond implementation and looking at evaluation and really listening to people's stories. The thing that I really sort of stayed with me were the comments at the end of your presentation when I think in one of the qualitative comments people really talked about that when they were talking about the mentor and the coach sharing the articles and the impact of that in terms of what it meant to them. That was really good in terms of kind of listening to those stories. So thank you, panelists. That was really, really good. Do we have questions from the audience? Anybody? We've talked for a long time, so any questions? Like I said, praise also welcome, thoughts, clarifications if you need any. Yes, Sabina, I think you raised your hand.
Yes, I did. I'm back there. Yeah, sorry. Thank you to all. It was maybe more of a comment actually than a question, or really it is more. See, we are nearly 11 o'clock anyway. But well, I would like to thank you all three, and of course Ranjana. I found it very insightful, and I must say, so I'm saying this in a good spirit. I thought it was. All of these were very interesting, not just very interesting takes on this topic, but also very original takes and very different ones, and certainly stretching beyond what I had imagined actually for this topic or under this topic. So maybe that's to say that my imagination didn't reach very far here, that maybe I was sort of stuck in what most of us did last semester, thinking about how we incorporate the technologies in what we were currently doing. But so I thought these were all very original takes to illustrate the many links, in fact, between uses of very different uses of technologies in different parts of our lives, and how that makes a link to education. So for me, that was this panel was a really interesting illustration of also the wealth of research that there is to be had and yet to be done around these different phases of where technology and educational aspects intersect in very different forms. So fascinating in this sense. Thank you all very much. Yes. So I didn't mean this to be the closing bit. That was just my take on it. So I'm trying to digest these interesting topics.
Thank you, and I completely agree with you, Sabine. I think, but then that is what lifelong learning is about, isn't it? I mean, it is beyond those formal settings and institutional settings, and that was really good. Any other questions? Anybody? I can see lots of praise coming in the chat. which is very well
And I think also, by the way, I mean, that's ultimately the longer reaching question here. It's to go beyond what we are all trying to do and to get to grips with at the moment. It's these longer reaching questions. So that was I think it was truly food for thought. Mm-hmm.
I would just add that while I'm sure you presenters would welcome, anyone in the audience who wanted to email you directly, if anybody has questions, feel free to email them to Jodie and myself as well, and we're happy to pass them on to these presenters and indeed any presenters from over the panel these days. And just as another note, because we got to have a couple of pre-meets, I've just really enjoyed working with this panel. I'm kind of sad it's over. I've learned a lot from hearing about your presentations, and I think I'm going to be signing up for a MOOC myself. So just thank you all. It's been really lovely to work with you.
Thank you so much for organizing all of this. And I think the FASS Festival is remarkable every year, whether it's online or offline. And this year we've learned that it's remarkable even when it's virtual. So yeah, thank you for coming today. And as theme champion for the Technology and Society theme, I mean, like I said, this is a special event because it's the first time we've had an event to do with the theme. It remains the only theme which didn't have a launch event for very obvious reasons. So do give us a Twitter follow if you can. I've put it on the chat. It's TechSoc Surrey. And thank you all so very, very much for joining us today.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. And thank you again, Vanjana, and all three contributors. This concludes the panel. I guess everybody is digesting the thoughts, maybe slightly overwhelmed, so that's why there are no immediate questions, but I'm sure this is triggering off an interesting discussion for the future. So thanks, everybody. Just to say, of course, we have one other event in the Research Festival this afternoon with our closing keynote connected then with sort of closing words, and not to forget, we will announce the winner of the PGR poster competition. So if you have some more moments to spare this afternoon, please come along. I myself, unfortunately, have to apologize. I have to attend a ref panel meeting. I have the dubious pleasure to be part of a ref panel, which will be interesting. So this is something I unfortunately cannot miss. So I hope you enjoyed the closing session as much as I certainly enjoyed all the other parts of the Research Festival. And thanks, everybody, and see you soon. Okay, bye.